Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a joint meeting of the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Commerce Committee, and Communications Committee, and the Assembly Utilities and Commerce Committee. My name is Alex Padilla, Chair of the Senate Committee, joined by Assemblymember Fuentes, Chair of the Assembly Committee. And the purpose of today's hearing is to fulfill our mandate in the Elections Code to hold a public hearing on any measure that has qualified for the state ballot at least 30 days before the election. Today we have on the agenda consideration of Proposition 16, the new two-thirds vote requirement for local public electricity providers. We'll start the hearing with a presentation on the measure by the Office of the Legislative Analyst. And to ensure balance, each side of the debate will be given 20 minutes to present their arguments. The witnesses for each panel were selected by the lead groups for the measure's proponents and opponents. We try to be fair and balanced around here. We'll provide equal time and try to keep everybody on track. And we'll conclude the hearing today with the opportunity for public testimony. We will attempt to provide those wishing to testify under public comment about 2 minutes to present their views, as long as the line doesn't reach San Francisco from here. With that, Chairman Fuentes, would you like to make any opening statement? And we'd certainly invite our Republican colleagues to do the same when they arrive.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. These statutorily required informational hearings on the propositions are a good forum to discuss the merits of initiatives before they go to the voters. However, the power of the legislature to respond to information from the hearing is limited. When we identify technical flaws in ballot language or problems with overall language, the legislature has no ability to amend the language prior to election. So if problems are identified, it's up to the voters to reject the ballot initiative and for the proponents to start again. Even with this limitation on the legislature's ability to respond to the hearing today, the hearing should not be a waste of time. This may be the only time before the election where there is a multiple-party public discussion on the proposal with opportunity for vigorous questions of and from both supporters and opponents. While I know there will be other debates on Proposition 16, this forum is the only time where there will be this level of scrutiny of the language. So I would like to start the hearing by thanking all the witnesses and the participants for being here today for this very important forum. Senator.
Thank you very much, members of both committees. Let's start by inviting forward Tiffany Roberts from the Legislative Analyst Office to present the measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Tiffany Roberts, Legislative Analyst Office. In my comments today on Prop 16, I'll provide you with the current lay of the land, so to speak, how Prop 16 would change that, and what the physical impact may be to state and local government revenues. On the first page of your handout, you see a quick summary. Prop 16 would place a new voter approval requirement on local governments before they can use public funds to start up or expand electricity service into a new territory or implement community choice aggregation. As you all know, Californians generally receive their electricity service from one of three types of providers, either an IOU, POU, or ESP. Next page of your handout. State law allows currently for a fourth option referred to as community choice aggregation, which I'll refer to in the rest of my testimony as CCA. The law allows a city or county, or a combination of the two, to provide electricity within their jurisdiction through a contract with an electricity provider other than the IOU that would otherwise serve that local area. Although only one CCA currently exists, several communities are exploring this option. In recent years, a limited number of local governments in the state have explored the idea of expanding publicly owned utilities into new territory currently served by an IOU. In some cases, these proposals have been put before the voters for their approval under provisions of state law. The current voter approval requirements for publicly owned electricity providers under state law are as follows. If a local government intends to expand its electricity service into a new territory, the new area must be annexed, and in some cases, a majority of voters in the area proposed for annexation must approve the expansion. In such cases, however, no vote of the public is generally required within the existing service territory. In contrast, local agency action to create and begin implementation of a CCA may be undertaken on a vote of the local agency governing board and does not require local voter approval. Next page of your handout. Proposition 16 would place new voter approval requirements on local governments before they can use public funds to start up or expand electricity service into a new territory or implement a CCA. Specifically, first, before an authorized local government entity can start up electricity service, it would need to receive approval by 2/3 of the voters in the area proposed to be served. Second, before an existing publicly owned utility can expand its electricity delivery service into a new territory, it would need to receive approval by 2/3 of the voters in the area currently served by the utility and 2/3 of the voters in the new area proposed to be served. Third, the measure would also require 2/3 voter approval for a local government to implement a CCA. The measure provides 3 exemptions to local governments from these voter approval requirements. The first exception is if the use of public funds has been previously approved by the voters, both within the existing local jurisdiction and the territory proposed for expansion. The second exception, if the public funds would be used solely to purchase, provide, or supply electricity from renewable sources. And third, if the public funds would be used only to provide electricity for the local government's own use. Next, turn to the last page of your handout for the physical impact of the proposition. Because this measure requires voter approval for specified local government actions that can currently be accomplished without a vote, it would result in additional election costs. In most cases, the balloting could be consolidated with already scheduled elections, and therefore the increased cost would probably be minor. This measure could affect local government costs and revenues due to its potential effects on the operation of publicly owned utilities and CCAs. It could also affect the finances of state and local government agencies in California because of its potential impact on electricity rates. These effects would largely depend on future actions of voters and local governments. First, the new requirements could result in public disapproval of such changes. Also, the existence of these new voter approval requirements could deter some local government agencies from proceeding with such plans. To the extent that this occurred, these local government agencies would be somewhat smaller in size and, as a result, would have lower total revenues and costs. Second, the enactment of this measure could also affect the finances of state and local government agencies in California due to its potential impact on electricity rates. As I mentioned before, some local government agencies might not start up or expand a publicly owned utility into a new territory or implement a CCA, and as a result of the measure's new requirements. In this event, the rates paid by electricity customers in that and neighboring jurisdictions could be higher or lower than would otherwise have been the case. For example, if the measure prevented the expansion of publicly provided electricity that depended on the new construction of new energy infrastructure, rates might be held lower than might otherwise be the case. On the other hand, if the measure lessened the competitive pressure on IOUs, the rates charged to electricity customers might eventually be higher than otherwise would have been the case. These impacts could affect state and local government costs, since many public agencies are themselves large consumers of electricity. Also, to the extent that changes in electricity rates affect business profits, sales, and taxable income, these factors could also affect state and local tax revenues. Our bottom line, in the short run, the net fiscal effect on all these factors on state and local government finances is unlikely to be significant on a statewide basis due to the relatively limited number of local government agencies considering the startup or expansion of electricity services into new territory at this time. In the long run, however, the net fiscal effect of the measure is unknown and would depend on future actions of local governments and voters. That completes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from members of the committee or either committee? Senator Leno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to join you here today. I think you gave a very thorough presentation. With regard to the fiscal impact, use the verb could affect. Clearly, they're unknown, so it's impossible to put any kind of price tag on it.
Morgan Dean with the Legislative Analyst Office. In terms of the long-run effect, it is impossible to put a price on it for a couple of reasons. And one, the effect of the measure is very dependent on how local government agencies that were perhaps planning to expand their power react, as well as the impact on electricity rates. And in terms of the impact on electricity rates, that's uncertain because the effect of the measure can work in various directions, and I'll just explain. As my colleague mentioned, to the extent that it reduces competitive pressure on electricity pricing due to reducing sort of competition in the electricity market, that could be serve as a upward pressure on pricing. But with publicly provided power, while in many cases in the state that is cheaper than privately provided power, that's not necessarily the case. And often with publicly provided power, there are a number of policy goals of the public agencies. For instance, perhaps increased use of renewable power may be beyond current law requirements, may be one of the policy goals. So the direction on prices is uncertain. There are factors that could go both ways, and that's in the end why the long-term effect is uncertain. But in the short run, given the number of agencies that are sort of currently considering expansion, that which is limited, the short-run effect is unlikely to be major.
You had mentioned there's the possibility that rates could go up because this will, in fact, limit competition.
That is one possible direction,
right,
but in conjunction with other possible impacts. That's correct.
In stepping back just a few feet and looking at this from a broader perspective, what this measure is really about is limiting competition. It's not about anything else, right?
Best not for us to comment on the motives of the proponents.
And I appreciate that. I know we're a fine line here because we're not to get political or presume motivations. But in effect, this will do nothing but limit competition.
It certainly has the effect of potentially deterring public expansion of power.
Does it increase competition?
And nothing in and of itself that serves to increase competition.
So I think we all recognize that this is about limiting competition. In your note, you say, and I'm reading from it here, it says, if an existing publicly owned utility seeks to expand its electric delivery service into a new territory, it must receive an approval by 2/3 of the voters in both the area currently served by the utility and the new area proposed to be served. An arduous task, in many cases, and a near impossible task to reach that 2/3. What does this do to new housing development? What does this do to the construction of new roads and infrastructure? What does this do to the value of existing homes in adjoining neighborhoods? Did you look at any of those aspects of this?
So the question of the increased vote requirement, how does that impact?
Well, let's say we have a neighborhood which receives its electricity from a municipal utility district, and there's to be a new development next door to this neighborhood. It will be served by the same muni. The vote will be required.
If it's within the current, so expanded development within the current service territory,
That's
the public owned
the
utility,
situation I'm talking about.
Is no requirement, no new vote requirements there. It's simply if you're expanding into a new territory that's currently served by an investor-owned utility. So it accommodates growth within a current service territory.
I want to come back. I want to just I've got a piece that was written by John Giesman. I think we're familiar with him. He served as a energy commissioner from 2002 to 2008. And I think he has a different read on that. He says, bottom line, if you're a resident of Anaheim or Burbank or Glendale or Pasadena or Riverside or any of the several dozen similarly impacted jurisdictions, your new neighbor isn't going to be getting his electricity turned on until 2/3 of the voters say so. So would you argue with that statement?
I guess one has to consider, I guess, sort of new neighbor. I guess if it's in, it depends on whether, if you're an expanding, if the geographic boundaries of the city is expanding through annexation, yes. So if that's your new neighbor, that would be subject to a vote requirement. It's just within the current geographic sort of boundaries of the public utility that would not be affected. So and there certainly are expanding cities geographically.
Pardon my interruption here. I mean, from what I'm listening, I mean, is there any area of the state of California today that does not have somebody servicing electricity? So when a new home goes up, it's in somebody's territory, right? So when somebody moves into a home, an old home or a newly constructed home, it's already in somebody's service territory. So it's not that other voters dictate whether the lights get turned on or not.
That's, I mean, essentially...
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard the question and response accurately. Continue.
So in the situation where that vote requirement would be necessary, would you have any concern for property values of existing homes, the potential that development wouldn't occur because a developer wouldn't want to come in and risk any investment dollars because it's dependent upon a 2/3 vote of a local area? I'm just trying to connect some dots because this is significant legislation being proposed, and I think we need, and I appreciate the time you allow me here, that we really understand what the possibilities are. Will this deter development? Will this deter builders from investing in California if this is law? Because no lights will be turned on in certain circumstances without a 2/3 majority vote.
I think perhaps that question is best addressed by the proponents and opponents, but probably to clarify the measure, I guess in terms of my understanding, consistent with what the chair was mentioning, that the state is essentially divided up in terms of service territory. So it's not as if any new development wouldn't be served by someone. The issue that's affected by the measure is who that someone is, whether it's the current provider or perhaps someone new.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hold on a second. We have a queue here. Assemblymember Huffman has some questions, followed by Assemblymember Swanson and Assemblymember Amiano. You're now on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Leno has done a good job of exploring how this would affect annexation and the ability of those who are served by municipal power authorities to get the same service as their neighbors in the future, and I share his concern in that regard. I'm also concerned by the precedent that this would have on revenue bonds. My understanding is that currently there is no situation where a government entity in California would ever be required to have a 2/3 vote at any level, local or state, to issue a revenue bond. Is that correct?
Not fully familiar with that law. What's clear, though, that the measure certainly does provide a very broad definition of public funds, including ratepayer funds as well. So that is, so it does place a vote requirement on financing that typically is not required.
Right. Well, I certainly invite somebody to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is that there is no precedent at all for requiring a 2/3 vote of a revenue bond of a government agency at any level in the state of California. Now, there are exceptions, and I want to ask you about those. One of the exceptions in this initiative would be for renewables. But as I read this, unless a new power authority, CCA or a municipal power authority, was going 100% renewable right out the gates with its energy portfolio, even if it was 99% renewable, this would require a 2/3 vote for using revenue bonds to finance any part of that new authority. Is that correct?
That's our understanding, yes.
And then finally, there's another exception with respect to government agencies that are using power to offset their own use. And my concern there is, as I understand current law, in part from having worked on a bill with Assemblymember Laird a couple years ago that allowed public entities to aggregate and share power among themselves, that they can do that now. And this would appear to require, if one government agency was generating more than it needed and wanted to aggregate with a sister agency, this would appear to require a two-thirds vote in order for them to do that. Do you have any different reading?
I think specifically for the legal concept of community choice aggregation, that does require sort of the voter approval.
No, I'm talking about if a county government wants to use public funds to invest in renewables to offset its own load. This would appear to create an allowance for them to do so without a two-thirds vote. However, if they want to take advantage of current law that allows them to share some of that energy with another nearby public agency, the way I would read this is that a two-thirds vote would be required. And so this would be a significant narrowing of current law with respect to public entities generating local renewables. And I wanted to ask for your assessment of that.
Right. Then they may, but we would be certainly happy to check on that for you to confirm that either way.
Assemblymember Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could call upon your expertise to help me sort of understand the finances involved with the expansion of electrical services during our current climate with renewable goals and AB 32 and et cetera. Has that become an easier thing to accomplish for electrical providers, or would you say that it's that there are more and new costs associated with the expansion of electrical service into new areas?
I think, Mr. Swanson, there certainly are increased regulatory requirements and goals, such as you mentioned, sort of the renewables portfolio standard that affects investor-owned utilities, and it's a goal set for publicly owned utilities as well. So, so to the extent that you expand, there are a number of new requirements that need to be met that do impact costs, certainly.
And would that also involve, from a financial standpoint, would that also involve new infrastructure investment by the utility to be able to accomplish this goal that in this ambitious environment of compliance with our goals, AB 32 and our renewables?
Certainly, potentially.
Okay. I mean, could you elaborate on that a minute? I mean, when I say infrastructure, it may mean the development of new infrastructure delivery systems and the like. Are we talking about that?
It could be generation, it could be distribution, it could be transmission, it could be all three.
And since so would you say that in California specifically, given our goals, that the proposition of moving forward on expansion of electricity, that there are financial challenges, and for local entities there may be financial risks associated with that. Is that right?
Yes, I would say that there would be financial challenges and probably risk across the board.
Okay, so am I? I'm just trying to understand the rationale between public consent and the risks that may be involved in moving forward. Not that we're all interested in efficient delivery systems, and we're interested in reducing the carbon footprint. Those are very important goals, and so I'm just curious about whether or not the public, as they are looking at this, or any entity that would expose the public to these particular challenges, whether or not there's a thorough examination of that public risk and the capability to deliver. If there's a failure, then that could result in additional rate increases. If there's a success, then it could result in something else. But I was trying to understand from a financial standpoint, you would argue that these decisions would have to be made carefully, because of all those risks that are involved.
Clearly, yeah, it's a very complex area that involves a lot of fiscal choices as well as policy choices as well. Currently, most of that decision-making is done by either a select group of voters or just by the local agency decision-makers as opposed to going out to the voters. So it's changing the process.
So it becomes a balance between balancing risks and voter consent and making sure that, in fact, this is a very important decision and needs to be made in an environment where the voters are clear of the risks that are involved.
The crux of the issue, I think.
Thank you.
Have Assemblymember Amiano, Senator Leno for a second time after him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to participate today. On the floor this morning, I think we passed a resolution about not swearing, so I'm going to try to abide by that resolution. And I understand the position that your office is in terms of doing this analysis. It appears to me this has a chilling effect. San Francisco is very unique. There are certain areas of the city that have been talking about public power before the whole city goes public power. We've gone to the ballot a few times and have not had the good luck that Sacramento has had. I'm thinking of Treasure Island, which is a part of our city. As it gets developed, they would opt into the city itself providing the power, not PG&E. We're looking into all that. So would you say effectively that plans in progress of that order would then be thwarted by this initiative so that we would have to do the two-thirds, go to the ballot and do the two-thirds, even though the declaration of intent is there and actually some of the work has been done already? There's no grandfathering.
Right, unless it's already gone to the voters and been approved by the voters, that exception would not be in place. That's right.
Senator Leno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2002, this is with regard to the CCA aspect of the initiative, Assemblywoman Migdon authored AB 117, which created the pathway for communities to pursue community choice aggregation. And in it, there's a section that reads, and I'm reading from it, all electrical corporations shall cooperate fully with any community choice aggregators that investigate, pursue, or implement community choice aggregation programs. Would you imagine that requiring a two-thirds majority vote for any pursuit of community choice aggregation is cooperating fully with any community choice aggregators?
It certainly places an extra hurdle to cooperation. I think is just a fair comment that it's a requirement that wasn't in Senator Migdon's legislation that adds certainly would complicate the.
Where in the word or understanding of the word cooperation is there hurdle?
Yes, I'll best to have the others speak to that, but it certainly is a requirement that isn't in current law, and that makes community choice aggregation
a higher hurdle.
A higher hurdle, yeah.
Which to me doesn't sound like cooperating fully. And then, just to put a point on it, and then thank the chair once again. As this measure is written, which corporations in the state of California could possibly benefit from this limited competition that you've suggested may be possible?
Best to we certainly our analysis doesn't look at sort of particular sort of business beneficiaries there, but so
it's limited. I mean, this is not going to benefit Safeway.
Is not going to benefit
Safeway.
And I mean the direct benefit to business or corporations, I mean, outside the utility industry, would depend on the measure's impact on electricity rates. And to the extent that the measure sort of increased or decreased rates, I mean, that could be, if it served to decrease rates, and that is a possibility, then there could be a benefit just in terms of the cost of doing business in the state. But as we mentioned, though, the impact on rates can go either which way.
Would it benefit municipal utility districts?
Not a direct benefit.
Is there an indirect benefit to municipal utility districts? Is there any benefit?
Not the, I mean, in terms of affecting government agencies directly, the potential benefit is, again, on the rate side, which is, I mean, the electricity rate market is sort of statewide, so, but that's more of an indirect.
And will it benefit investor-owned utilities?
And potentially,
we're all adults here. I think we can
Yes.
have this conversation. It's all right.
yes.
I'm just saying, trying to understand what's going on here. We're talking about the well-being of the state of California.
Clearly,
Is this good for California? Is it bad for California? And how this works?
And not our role to comment on the sort of the policy merits of the initiative, but clearly I mean, one potential consequence if the voters approve this initiative would that the mixture of public and privately provided power in the state could be different than it otherwise would be the case, and that's a policy. Whether that's good or bad, obviously, is a sort of.
I would not ask you if that's good or bad, but I just want to better understand what you said. So it won't benefit munis, it could benefit IOUs.
To the extent that it decreases competitive pressure.
To the extent that it decreases sort of competitive pressure and plans of local agencies that are planning to expand or thwarted, that would maintain the current sort of service territory and revenues of the IOUs.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Assemblymember Swanson for a second
just-
time, and
yeah,
then
just-
after...
Just a quick. Does the proposition, reduce the authority of the Public Utilities Commission in any way?
No, it does not.
Oh, it's just.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Please don't go too far away. We may have questions as the hearing proceeds.